And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Wednesday, April 25th. I am your host for today's program, and many of the stories we read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. And today we're going to go straight to the Fort Hall Indian Reservation, Shoshone Bannock Reserve there, and talk with Mark Trahant about the latest in the Republican primary. Looks like Mitt Romney has it wrapped up. Mark Trahant, thanks for joining us with another issue of the Native News Update. And let's update ourselves on where the primary process is for the Republicans. It looks like we have a candidate.
We have a candidate. The race is over. Mitt Romney's cleared the field, and it's now just his race to play with. Yesterday, he already kind of outlined his general election pitch. Conservatives will try to get him to reiterate conservative principles, but don't look for it. He's moving to the center, and from now on, he'll be trying to get independent voters.
Okay. I was reading today out of Minnesota that the Paul Rand coalition there, which is pretty much taken a good portion of the Minneapolis GOP party over with, says that they won't consider moving to Romney unless he appoints Rand Paul's son as a vice presidential candidate. So the political pressure is on. Is Newt out of the scene totally yet, or is he still hanging in there too?
Newt suspended his campaign, so now he's out of the scene. So from now on, all of the delegates that are acquired will go for Romney, except for a few for Paul. He only needs 300 more to actually lock it up, so it's a pretty sure thing.
It's just a procedural thing at this particular point. Rand Paul
Paul?
Pardon me?
Let me just say something about Paul. I think the whole point of Ron Paul's candidacy this time around was to prepare his son for a run in 4 years. And I think this is just more evidence of that. That's why he won't quit. That's why he eventually will stick with the Republicans. He won't leave the party. He's getting it ready so that Rand Paul can be the real conservative standard bearer in 4 years.
Is that some of the pressure we're seeing from Minneapolis already? They at least want Rand Paul's name thrown into the pot, even though it's not likely that Mitt Romney's going to do that this time around?
Yes, I think that's right. I think it's really, Romney really will try to do what he can to try to do some damage control with Hispanic voters. And that probably means he'll turn to Marco Rubio from Florida, who's very conservative, but also Hispanic.
That's interesting. And what have you heard of any other names being thrown out there right now, or any of the other old stalwarts still viable?
The governor of Ohio, Ohio being a swing state and very important to Republicans winning, Governor Rob Portman, who was the author of many Bush administration budgets, which you'd think would disqualify. Another name that pops up from time to time is Jeb Bush. And they had a really nice segment on The Daily Show where they pointed at Marco Rubio, would point at Jeb Bush, who would point at Portman, and each would say, no, the other guy is the one that should do it.
Indeed. The governor of Ohio had quite a big defeat earlier this year after passing some union-busting law, but the state undid that, if I remember right.
Right.
And that was a state that Obama took in the last election.
And I think Obama, if he gears up right and is focused on the issues they need to focus on, could do that again.
Okay.
Both in Ohio and Florida.
So is vice presidential candidates, that gets announced during the convention after the nomination process is through. Don't they typically make their big announcement right after the nomination process is over as well?
Yeah, anytime this summer it could pop up. It was in the summer when John McCain picked Sarah Palin from Alaska before the convention so that she can all be prepped by the convention.
How does Mitt Romney undo flipping from the center left to the far right? He's got to he's kind of like on a trampoline. Now he's got to kind of flip back
without being a flip flopper. It's a tough act. I'm not sure how he'll do it.
Okay.
He'll probably focus on economy. That if you elect me, I can fix this economy. I think one of the things that I certainly want to do as a writer is column on this, because their primary prescription is to cut the federal budget drastically. That's being tried right now in Europe, and none of the European economies that are doing that are recovering. In
Well,
fact, Britain just went back into recession.
right. I was just going to ask you about that. This whole idea, and you were talking about at times of austerity, which I think everyone agrees with, whether it's independents, Republicans, Democrats, that we need to constrain government to a certain extent. But the discussion in the New York Times and several other publications from Europe today is that they are beginning, the conservatives are beginning to rethink how extreme austerity is not the only formula, that there has to be a balance between government stimulation and programs to create jobs and austerity at the same time. Is that how you're reading that?
Yeah, I think we need growth. We need to figure out a way to make the economy grow again, and austerity is not it. I gave a speech last week at the University of Idaho, and it's on Facebook and other places, but I would really recommend that your viewers try to look at it. One of the things I tried to do is reframe the whole debate about government. Really, we have this unprecedented demographic imbalance, and it's global. It's not American, it's global, where we have more older people, and that requires more government services. And it's that we ought to be talking about, not just the role of government.
Okay, well, I'm trying to understand all those things. I'm trying to understand where the Republican Party has taken us. Obviously, when you talk economy, one of the things in Wisconsin, which seems to be an experiment in what that American Legislative Education Committee, or whatever it is, ALEC, that's putting out all these test pieces of legislation. Wisconsin's been a good experimental ground because the Tea Party took the Assembly, the Senate, and the governorship, stripping away regulations, stripping away environmental controls, to wetlands, to the woods, all these things, all these regulations that safeguarded the environment and worker. Equal pay for women has been repealed in Wisconsin. So there's an experimental ground going on here, but jobs at the expense of other things at the same time. Huge breaks for corporations again. Some of them that got a lot of money, more tax credits and stuff.
Well, and where the real implication for all of this, and I think this is at the top of the list for tragedies, the president raised it yesterday, is that while you're doing these great corporate tax breaks and keeping the services flowing to the elderly population, which you should, you're taking and adding this incredible burden of debt on young people. $1 trillion more than credit card debt. It's the fastest growing part of our debt burden in society. And what it's doing is it means a young person, after they get out of college, cannot afford to make basic decisions like buying a house because their student debt is so crippling. And we've got to rethink that. We've got to invest in young people while we have this demographic imbalance at work.
My understanding is that the Republicans are not going to do anything about the interest rates on student loans, that they're arguing that students can pay more than, 3.4% interest. Now it's going to go to 6 or something like that?
6.8, it's going to double. But that's just new loans. We've got to deal with the old loans. I mean, we've made college unaffordable for most people. And I listened yesterday to the conservatives trying to rally their base on what Obama was saying on student loans. And what they did is they said, look, Obama went to elite institutions. He racked up a lot of debt. No wonder we have a problem. But that is not even the issue. It's state schools. It's people going to ordinary schools racking up debt. And I mean, I think it should be a criminal offense if somebody goes to school on student loans and then wants to be a teacher, because there's no way those salaries will pay those loans back. It's impossible. We've got to change the system so that it works for people.
Okay, and you're saying that Europe is, and we're reading about it, Europe is beginning to rethink this austerity. So you're talking about some kind of a balancing act in the middle. How do we get to that middle when everything seems to be on the outer edges?
Well, one thing I think we can do is start to separate what's government spending that's investment versus what's just straight government spending. And education needs some reform, but we can still treat it as an investment and make it work for people, saying that to our young people, we believe in you and we expect you to do great things, and we're going to help you along the way, rather than adding this level of debt that's just unsustainable.
One of the first things that the Tea Party Republican, who's getting to be the darling of the Republican Party, and watch whether or not he somehow shows up in the vice presidential formula, Scott Walker, who spends most of his time out of state raising money nowadays, the first thing he did was kill broadband infrastructure development monies from the federal government and a couple $100 million in money that would have come for high-speed rail. He rejected that, killing those projects and jobs in Wisconsin. Is that looking at the future in any realistic way? Both broadband and infrastructure seem to be exactly where society needs to go in the long run.
And that's what I would consider an investment. We have some really structural investment infrastructure needs in this country that we've got to start paying attention to. High-speed rail is one that gets you forward, and I think it's the right thing to do. But I'll tell you a real basic one that's being ignored is water systems. We've got to upgrade water systems across the country. They were built a long time ago, and many are starting to fail, and we're not spending any money in that regard. And that would be a straight investment. That's something that pays off in the end.
If the election was held today, who would win?
Obama.
By how many points? Margin?
Well, I wouldn't look at it that way. I'd look at it how many electoral votes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting because you have to look at electoral votes. We'll talk about electoral votes again because that's another something that needs to probably be reformed in the long run.
Right. I think right now he's at about 280, and he needs 270 to win.
Okay. So, and that's all he needs to do. He needs 270 plus 1 to win. So.
Right.
Thanks for joining with us, Mark. Here, we'll touch base with you again soon. Next time, have your regular computer back.
It's in the shop. I hope it is back very quickly. I already miss it.
Take care.
Okay.
And that is another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you for joining with us and come back again soon.